Tourette's podcast is not a medical advice show. It's a show about experiences. In the course of that, we may talk about medications or therapies or stories from the doctor's office, but don't mistake any of that for medical advice or direction. It's not. Get that only from people or places licensed or certified to give it. Not from a massively fun and action-packed podcast about our life experiences. Such as...
I remember getting emotional. I knew that people were going to notice me what I was doing and question it. I felt pretty confused because I did not know what was going on with myself.
This is Tourette's podcast, made possible with support of the Tourette Association of America and part of the Geeks Rising Network. Apparently, you guys loved last week's episode, which is not a credit to me. It's all to Danny Jack, our guest, who, according to you guys, just had a way of putting things that hit about what identity means or doesn't mean, who or what is supposed to define you, the insecurities we might feel about where we are at different stages in life. Danny just nailed it in a way that I totally didn't do when I was 16. And I'm not saying that to be ageist or that it's surprising that a 16-year-old would have that level of wisdom. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just appreciating the perspective that Danny Jack's very jam-packed and sometimes very difficult life has afforded us. Anyway, you know what I mean. If you missed that episode, line it up in your podcast player. If you're listening to this podcast at all, I would say that's an episode you shouldn't miss. Another thing a lot of you related to was that question about just sitting down to read a big old dense book. Seems so simple, but if you have adult ADHD, as many in the Tourette community do, then it's really not at all simple. The question was basically, I love reading, but my ADHD makes it too difficult. I'll read the page, I'll forget what I just read because my mind wandered. I want to read a few responses here. Jamie in the Tourette's podcast discussion group just nutshelled it. Quote, I've struggled to read books my whole life. End quote. Mitchell said, quote, audiobooks. I listen to probably one a week. I can't sit and read a book to save my life, but I listen to it on audio and I can't get enough. End quote. And Mitchell points out the promo for audible.com, the one free book. And hey, Audible, if you want to do a promo here, because people are talking about audiobooks as a great way to access books for people who find visual reading tough. And I agree, there's something about listening that works better for me. Like, it hits a different part of the brain, or maybe it's that the practice of it is different because you can move about and multitask and still follow along, which is kind of interesting in and of itself. And before I go further, I got to say, the guest on the episode this week is an author of 2 books, and we're going to be talking about that. But these books are right in the wheelhouse. They're about experiences that people in the Tourette community directly relate to. But they're really great for people in, but perhaps more importantly, outside of the community because of what they teach. They definitely inform about what it's like to be in this kind of position, to be misunderstood, and really think about it so you can develop the correct kind of empathy. To see that we are you. We don't have to bully each other and waste our material on offenses and defenses. So anyway, that's quite a bit different than what we're talking about here with this question about adult ADHD and reading, which is a legitimate thing to talk about. If we have issues following what's on the page, I want to know what works for you so we can try to get around it and have that option to really enjoy. Like try reading a book like Dune by Frank Herbert with bad ADHD. That's such a complex story. It's not like the streamlined David Lynch version, which, by the way, is a fantastic film in every sense of the word. But the book is like, let's just say there's a reason I've read it 6 or 7 times beyond it just being a good book. Becky, the dreadful barber, said, I love to read, but my attention is so bad. Sometimes I have to read the sentence or paragraph a few times for it to get into my brain. Or it comes like I'm just reading words, but sometimes the words don't seem to go together, if that makes sense. I know what I mean, but not the best at articulating things. But yes, I love Audible, as I just plug in and listen. End quote. Okay, so that's 2 points for Audible. Audible reps, tourettespodcast@gmail.com, or the contact form at tourettespodcast.com. Daphne said, quote, I can barely read books because of it. I rarely do, along with an inability to form and hold name identities in my head. When I do read, it's nonfiction only and minimal name recall. End quote. And that I can really relate to. And it's not just books. I'm talking about with the part about names. I swear I can watch an entire television series and not know the names of the main characters. I don't know what that is, especially if you've got a Game of Thrones type show with like 30 main characters, some of them with more than one name. I swear I'm just making myself sound so dense right now. I'm praying you guys relate. But no, this is a thing, and it's worth talking about because, sorry, Audible, I don't always want to listen to an audiobook. I want to have the story play out in my own head the way that I interpret it, like the inflections of the dialogue and the voices of the characters. And sometimes if the narrator is a famous person, I just picture that person the entire time. And I end up not really developing the picture in my head of what the story is without that famous person being in the room too, or basically acting as all the main characters. Am I alone in this? As I was saying last week, I love to read. And I read a lot, even though it's mainly news these days. Bummer. But I do have a couple books waiting on me. Also, if someone can recommend any books to me, here's what I'm looking for. Something gut-wrenching, like really rip your heart out, gut-wrenching, nothing bad happening to animals or kids, but if the whole ordeal revolves around adults and it's just devastating, recommend it to me. Sometimes you just need to dive into that kind of emotion to get that contrast coming out of it. I think. Maybe it's a bad idea. I don't know. What I do think has massive power is the young adult book category. Just really incisive things you can absorb at that age. And like you never really forget. Like all the powerful books I read when I was, between like 12 and 17. Like the details, everything really stands out to me. The Thief of Always by Clive Barker, that was a young adult book that he wrote that really, really stuck with me. Anyway, that's why I think our guest this week is so important. She's written 2 books that do an excellent job relating the experiences of someone with Tourette or someone who experiences bullying, basically relating these things in a relatable fictional story. So it's fiction, but obviously grounded in reality. That's really the appreciation for fiction. Even the most abstract and conceptual fiction has some basis in reality, if you're reading it in a language you can understand. And that's what Ryani Patel, our guest this week, gets right. She's a skilled writer. She's not just preaching to the choir of the Tourette community, but putting it out there in a way that young adults at large can understand and relate to. So making these experiences that we have real and relatable and emotionally attachable, and thus becoming those things that you don't forget in the books you read when you're a young adult. So that's her power. That's Ryani's power. I think this episode is a really good primer for outsiders on what Tourette is and what it feels like. It's a good episode to share with young people, with parents who might be new to Tourette. Again, being misunderstood and having to explain what's up and being bullied. Like these are themes covered here in her 2 books, The Boy Battle and her new one, The Terrible Bullies. And I'll let her explain that title. And as I told Ryani's dad, his name is Yogi, and it's been great talking with him. As I told Yogi, it's really something that Ryani would be someone you would single out for bullying. And I'm obviously not saying that there are people who deserve to be singled out. No, I'm obviously not saying that, but Ryani's all over it. She's owning it. She's explaining it and writing books about it really confidently. And maybe that's why she's doing these things, but she's way ahead of where I was when I was her age. She's 16. And again, I don't point out that to be ageist, like she's written 2 books and she's only 16. No, I'm not saying that either. What I am saying is that being 16, she has something to say, and it's different than what I would write, say, from my experience. And perhaps different from what our guest coming up next week, he's a professional boxer, probably different than what he would write. But we all mutually get it, So I'm really excited to have Ryani on here to hear from her and how she got into writing. The Terrible Bullies, her new book, by the way, came out as the #1 new release on Amazon in the category of disability for young adults. It's getting great reviews. Jack Magnus, writing for the publication India West, says this: The Terrible Bullies is a motivational look at bullying and how students can get involved with parents, teachers, and principals in dealing with the issue. Patel's characters are authentic, their stories resonate, and their attempts to break out of the cycle of bullying are inspiring. The Terrible Bullies is most highly recommended. End quote. So this is not a paid spot, by the way. Audible, that's your role here. As always, it's just me wanting to talk with the person we have on. So here's me and Ryani Patel.
Hi, my name is Ryani Patel. I'm 16 years old and I am from San Francisco, which is also known as the Bay Area. And I like to write, draw, collect, and I like to hang out with my friends and family and do TikTok videos.
Nice. Well, so when you said you like to write, I mean, you're underplaying it a little bit. I mean, you actually have published books out, and
Yes.
your second one is out now. Could you tell us about it? What's the title of the book, and what's it about?
So the book is about raising awareness of school bullying. The book centers around three main characters, Jake, Tanya, and Diamond, teaming up together, and they stop the new bullies in high school. So the book is called The Terrible Bullies, and in The Terrible Bullies, they are freshmen in high school. They notice bad things the bullies are doing to other students, but they create a plan to expose them in school. The bullies have their own idea of getting back at the trio, in a good way, and at the end, everyone involved, including the principal, will learn a valuable lesson.
So that there could be a lot of different audiences for this kind of book. I feel like adults could learn from it. Your peers could learn from it. What do you hope readers come away with?
What I want the readers to understand about the book is I have three main messages. The first message is for the person that is being bullied. You do have the courage and strength to stand up for yourself. You don't have to be afraid of anyone. The second message is for the person that is doing the bullying. Have the awareness to know that what you say or what you do is harming the other person, and that is not right. You want to be the better person. And the third message is that the word terrible is in quotations because all bullies are not terrible. There might be a reason why they're acting this way that you are not aware of.
That's important to remember because sometimes, it can be an insecurity, or there might be trouble at home that influences behavior. And it's really smart that you're pointing this out. How did you, so this is your second book, right? How did this one come about? Did you start writing and you're like, wait, I have a book idea here? Or did you decide it's time for another book? Were these themes on your mind or something that inspired it? How did this come about?
Yes, it was time for another book. After writing The Boy Battle, which raises awareness of Tourette syndrome, I wanted to write another book based on my bullying experiences to help improve our schools and communities. I don't want to see others get teased, hurt, and embarrassed like I was in middle school. I want to be an inspiration, helping others cope with their own struggles.
So you mentioned the first book is about your life with Tourette. When did that journey begin? How old were you when you started showing tics? And do you remember that part of it? And what was it doing to your life? What are your earliest memories of having Tourette?
Well, I was diagnosed with Tourette's at the age of 7 from my pediatrician. Before that, I would tic, but I did not know what was happening. I would twitch my eyes, whack my arms in the air, and stomp my legs. My mom saw this and talked to the pediatrician, who said I should get tested for Tourette's. My doctor referred me to Stanford Children's Hospital, and it was then that I was diagnosed after doing some neurology tests. During this time, I remember getting emotional. I knew that people were going to notice me what I was doing and question it. I felt pretty confused because I did not know what was going on with myself. I knew that I was different. What I had done to come to terms about my tics was take pills, go to my therapist 2 to 3 times a week, and listen to rain and ocean music at night to help me fall asleep.
That is really great advice, actually. I've been searching for different... I always have... I've always had a hard time with sleep. Always. My entire life, to this day. Last night, I just got a few hours. Sometimes I can do it pretty well. It just depends on how relaxed I am at the end of the night.
Yeah.
But looking for different things like that, different sounds, different kind of... You can kind of change your environment, and that can help. And I don't remember to do that enough. Sometimes, I like listening with headphones, but sometimes that can kind of hurt your head. If you turn or sleep on your side, it's not really comfortable. How do you do that? Did you put it on your laptop or like some speakers, or how did that work for you?
Well, what I did was I would have my phone on my stand and turn the phone downwards so that the light doesn't distract me. And I would either listen to ocean or rain music, whichever one I felt comfortable with.
Hmm.
And I would just like listen to it, and that's what made me like more calmer and calmer and made me sleep.
Yeah, there is something interesting about the sounds of water that I feel like are really comforting. If it's kind
Right.
of lights or the sound of the ocean, there's something about rain too during the daytime.
Mhm.
Uh, I feel like I can work better during rainy days, and I can't really figure out why. Unless when it's sunny outside, I want to get outside. I want to take my camera outside and take photographs and walk around. So maybe it has something to do with that, where if it's raining, I know I can't do that, and my only other option is working. But
Yeah.
there's something about rain that just really helps me focus. Does that kind of speak to you in any way? Do you relate to that?
Well, I do agree with you because on sunny days I would love to go outside, spend time outside. But if it's like on a rainy day, you can't go outside because it's like pouring, it's wet. And so I like to do work in the rain. And it is relaxing because that rain noise it's different and I like the
Hmm.
sound of it. And also when it's done raining, I love the smell.
Yeah. It smells really good, and there's a nice texture to it.
Right.
Well, let's get back to your book. So writing books in general, at this stage of your life, I mean, you're at, I think, an important period of your life. So being 16, you have a lot to juggle. You know, you're probably thinking about the end of high school and, kind of what lies ahead for you. There's driving, you're also kind of gauging your experiences, developing a repertoire, uh, the group of friends you hang out with. You're really kind of shaping yourself and your future. But you're also in a really unique position to teach adults, especially. I think adults can learn from you and your peers. Can also take good advice from your messaging. So, what do you think your goal is at this stage in your life?
Well, my goal is to be a storyteller for kids, teens, and adults. I want to be a voice of today's generation, writing about topics that affect them in a way that both adults and young people can understand. My second goal is to get good grades in school so that I could go to my dream college, which is UCLA, and study screenwriting.
Nice, nice. Oh, so do you want to turn that into a career in film, cinema? I mean, is that the direction you'd like to go?
Yes, I would really
Nice,
love to go that direction.
nice. Do you watch a lot of movies?
Um, yeah, I like movies. I do watch movies.
Yeah, but probably a lot of reading though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
The Tourette Association of America is the premier nonprofit working to raise awareness, advance research, and provide ongoing support to those with Tourette syndrome or tic disorder. With a network of over 130 chapters, support groups, and centers of excellence, the TAA engages with communities across the nation in an effort to provide tools, webinars, workshops, and support for all seeking assistance. As a primary sponsor of Tourette's podcast, the TAA supports the authentic conversations showcasing the diverse representation of the TS community. To learn more, visit Tourette.org. Tourette.org.
Again, I was, and we talked about this a little bit before we started recording. I can remember being 16, but I wasn't a 16-year-old in the year 2020, and I don't really know what it's like for you. And I feel like I could learn from you. But when I was at that age, I was really ashamed of my tics, and I didn't want people to know about them. I'm sure people noticed certain things about me, but I didn't want them to. I didn't want to talk about it, about my Tourette. So how did you get into the mind of being comfortable talking about it and being open about it? I know you had said earlier that, you were worried people would just notice this about you, and it was very conspicuous. But how did you get comfortable talking about it, and how have you explained this to other people?
Well, I knew that I wasn't the only one who had Tourette's and tics. After telling people what I had, then they would understand what I was going through, and they even said that it was okay to tick in front of them, and they would not mind at all. I got a lot of support in my 5th grade class where my teacher explained to the class about what I had, and that made me feel really comfortable to know I could tick and that was okay without people judging me.
That's cool. So your teachers were understanding and cool about it?
Yes, they were.
Nice. 'Cause sometimes I hear from people who didn't have it, and this might be people who were maybe 16 back in the 90s or the 80s, but even today too, sometimes people have teachers who don't seem to understand or don't give them that room they need to be themselves and tick, and that can be really harming, I think, to be in an environment where you're kind of put to the test, quite literally in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I've heard stories like that, and I just that's not good because the teacher is older than the student, so the adult should know better not to do that.
Exactly. Set the example, and especially if the bottom line is learning, kids should feel empowered. Not really put down. People should be empowered and comfortable, and in an environment where they can actually have success learning, and not feel bad about it. If it's I think the worst thing ever is if school is a place that you dread to go. That the place where you get your education is a place that you're scared to go, or you have such levels of self-shame that, that's a bad thing. So it's great that you have an environment that's supportive of you, because that can make all the difference.
Right.
Are people, for the most part, understanding when you explain your TS? How do your friends regard it? Do you remember some of those early conversations when you were explaining it and kind of how they were interpreting this?
So, yes, I do feel people are understanding of what Tourette syndrome is. I explained to them that I have this condition, that I cannot control the random habits I would do. After I became a youth ambassador for the Tourette Association of America, I tell people that Tourette's is a neurological condition that affects the brain with motor and vocal tics. They would quickly understand when I tell them that when I tick, it's like a sneeze. It just happens. You can't control it. My friends know that I have it, and it doesn't bother them at all. The most comfortable I was with them, the less I would tick, because I knew it was not stressful to be around my friends. I would not be nervous or be scared to be by myself. They still think I am a good friend to them and not doing any harm.
And I hope they appreciate the fact that your differences kind of give you an advantage in a way, and I'm not saying an advantage over other people, but you're in a position to really have a sense of empathy and help other people. And I guess knowing that there's something about you that could be misunderstood by other people, you're in a position to hear people out. And I think you're going to be a really great communicator. And I think that's why you're a great writer. You have, that's an essential ingredient. No, it's true. That's an essential ingredient, I think, in writing successfully, is having a sense of empathy and understanding of what other people go through. And that helps you, I think, develop characters and to be able to wonder what other lives are like, and be patient enough to listen to other people too. And that's such a skill that's really lacking, it seems like, in the world. And so you're in a really prime position to be an advocate, as a youth ambassador and so on.
Thank you.
Talking with other people who have Tourette is something I never did before the podcast started. I mean, it really has changed my life and has made, I think, the world more comfortable, knowing that there's there's literally a million other people, out there in the US who have this.
Right.
And it's just nice being able to connect with other people like yourself, people of different ages. And, I learn something every time. I mean, this has really been a lot of fun. So I have a feeling you're dedicating yourself to advocacy and storytelling in the long term. Where do you hope your talents take you?
Well, I hope my talents take me to writing more books in the future that people find interesting. I would like to be noticed in the Hollywood industry. I really want people to come up to me and say, wow, Ryani, you helped me you're such an inspiration to me and you made a difference in my world. That would mean very much to me. I would really appreciate that. And I really just want to make a positive difference in the world. I do want to write a third book, and I want it to be about vaping in schools because I feel like that is an important topic for my generation and my and the schools and communities around me. So I would really want to write about that.
Where can people find your work? Your books, any other work you do? Is there a website or Amazon, or how do people find it?
So I do have a website, and it's called Ryani Patel, RyaniPatel.com. That's my website.
And could you spell that?
RyaniPatel.com.
Cool.
I also have an Instagram, and my Instagram is Ryani Patel 007, aka 007. I have a Facebook, and it's called Ryani Patel Author. And my 2 books, The Boy Battle and The Terrible Bullies, can be found on Amazon.com. The second book can be also found on MascotBooks.com's website.
That's cool. Have you ever considered doing like an audiobook version?
Maybe in the future.
Because you have a good narrating voice. You should consider that. That'll be fun.
Thank you so much.
Oh, Ryani, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, you're already making a positive difference because the more people tell their stories, the more other people feel empowered and comfortable in telling their stories too. So,
thank you so much.
So this is a pretty heavy brick, and I appreciate it.
I agree with you, and I'm really honored. Like I said in the beginning, like I'm honored because I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad you took your time off to talk with me, and I really appreciate that coming from you. So thank you.
Oh, I mean it. I'm being sincere, and it's my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. Big thanks to Ryani Patel, and shout out to her dad, Yogi, who, by the way, is a parent doing it right. Just really proud and supportive of everything she is. The total opposite of what we hear about sometimes, the parenting style of, like bottle it up and it'll go away. He's not like that. He's a solid dad, and he's something to celebrate. Ryani, congratulations on everything, and I will link to her work. Again, really blowing it up on Amazon. I'm going to link to her work in the show notes with this episode at tourettespodcast.com. This show is made possible by the Tourette Association of America, online at tourette.org. Please consider supporting them. By the way, something else to check out. It's up at tourettespodcast.com right now. Kieran, aka Tourette's Nerd, assembled a really cool video featuring different lives of people with TS, myself included, going over some really key topics. It also features one of my favorites, Brittany Wolf, as well as Shyla, aka Simply Tourette's. The Tots podcast also has an interview up with me at totspodcast.com, TOTS. On that episode, the host, whose name is also Ben, is coming out about having TS, and he talks with me and with Amanda Talty from the Tourette Association about everything surrounding that, about just kind of coming to terms with your TS. Totspodcast.com, TOTSpodcast.com. GeeksRising.com is the host of the Geeks Rising Network, bringing Tourette's podcast to the world. Check out the new podcast, Stuck Listening. Join Ezra Phillips on his journey to surviving the post-apocalyptic world. He takes refuge in an abandoned broadcasting station and hopes to call for help. He passes the time by rifling through the boxes of discarded tapes left behind, most of which have been marked as rejected. Ezra finds himself listening to the tapes between his calls for help. In the meantime, he is stuck listening and waiting. That's Stuck Listening at geeksrising.com, where you can also find all the past episodes of Tourette's podcast. And shout out to Heather Welch of the Sunshine Summit, one of my favorite people ever. You can check out her work at geeksrising.com. If you would like to give individual support to Tourette's podcast, it really helps. Patreon.com/Tourette's podcast. If you become a supporter, you will be considered an executive producer. Thanks for listening, everybody, and please join the Tourette's Podcast discussion group on Facebook if you haven't yet. Sophia, our wonderful admin, does the best job in the world keeping that place nice and clean and civil. Thank you, Sophia. I will talk to you next week.